Iran's president says, quote, the doors for interaction are still open, but his latest comments about Tehran's nuclear intentions are shaking up the international community. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has asked the country's atomic energy chief to start producing higher enriched uranium. His comments Sunday were broadcast on state television. Just days ago, it appeared Iran was edging closer to a UN-backed deal that would have Tehran ship its low-enriched uranium abroad for conversion. Iran's uranium stockpile is a core concern for the international community. The West fears Tehran could use the material in an atomic weapons program. Iran, though, insists its enrichment drive is purely for peaceful purposes. As the Iranian president raises the stakes, the world is reacting. Britain saying Mr. Ahmadinejad's declaration is a matter of, quote, serious concern. Germany's defense minister expressed his frustration in dealing with Tehran, while his U.S. counterpart says it's time for the world to rally together.
If the international community will stand together and bring pressure to bear on the Iranian government, I believe there is still time for sanctions and pressure to work.
Today's statement shows that a farce is being played out, just as we have seen in the past, that the outstretched hand of the international community has not only been taken, but pushed back. The people involved, especially on the Iranian side, have to seriously think whether they want to reach a solution and whether they should, which will have a positive effect on the country. The UN Security Council is responsible for international security, and it is asked to take the responsibility now and come up with further steps.
CNN contacted the International Atomic Energy Agency for reaction. The IAEA says that it does not want to comment at this time due to the sensitive nature of this issue. Well, some analysts say that the Iranian president's announcement is just a negotiating tactic. Is it? For more on this issue, we turn to a former UN weapons inspector. David Albright is now the president of the Institute for Science and International Security. Mr. Albright is joining us now from Washington. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of this announcement that Iran is going to be enriching uranium to 20%? What does this mean?
Well, one is Ahmadinejad is starting the process that he said he would start last fall if the West did not give them low-enriched uranium for their research reactors. So I think he's just falling out. A promise he made back several months ago, the West had come in and said, look, you know, we'll give you that low-enriched uranium for your research reactor if you send out your existing stock of lower-enriched material. And Iran refused to do that. So now Ahmadinejad is basically going back and saying, okay, we're now going to produce it ourselves.
So where does this leave this negotiating process? The West is saying if Iran hands over 70% of its low-enriched uranium, then it will get back the uranium it needs for its own plant. Where does this stand?
Well, I think it's pretty clear Iran is not going to take up that offer, and whatever Ahmadinejad said a couple days ago probably was misinterpreted as somehow saying that he was going to make a new offer. His speech didn't really deal with this subject very much. It was on other things, and I think perhaps the media made more out of it than it should have been made. If Ahmadinejad would have made this announcement today with some planning, I mean, one, the nuclear people have to start being prepared for this. It's a major step diplomatically. It'll have and it already is. You quoted the defense minister of Germany, of the United States, essentially condemning this action. And so I think it's going to certainly up the stakes in all this. And there's some things to watch out for. One is the amount of higher enriched uranium that Iran needs for a research reactor is very small. And what you have to worry about is that this isn't really about making the fuel for the enrichment or not making the fuel for a research reactor. It's about taking all their enriched uranium that they have, it's 3.5% enriched, and running it up to 20%. And so if Iran only does a little bit, this isn't that big of a deal. If it continues to enrich up to this higher level, it's a very big deal, because what that would show is that it's trying to get most of the rest of the way to producing the weapon-grade uranium that it could actually use in a nuclear weapon.
And so how close would that bring Iran to having a nuclear weapons building capacity?
It would bring them very close, because if they turn all the low-enriched uranium they have into this, it's actually about 20% enriched. It's still low-enriched uranium, but at a higher quality low-enriched uranium. If they did that, they could then turn that 20% material into 90%, which is the amount you want for a nuclear weapon, very rapidly, and in a small number, or in a very small facility that would be almost impossible to find from the outside. And so they would be able to pretty rapidly produce the material for a bomb in a place that's very unlikely to be found. And if you get cynical about this process, I mean, and this again, I want to be careful how I say this, but in some way, if you're the camp that says Iran just wants nuclear weapons, then what may be happening here is that Iran is trying to get as much use out of the Natanz plant to get as close as possible to having weapon-grade uranium before it's bombed. And that this is all just a ploy to say, look, we now want to take the 3.5%, run it up to 20%, call it for research reactor. It's civil, it's safeguarded by the International Atomic Energy Agency. We'll never use it for a bomb. But in the process, they get extremely close to having the material for a nuclear weapon. And then when they break out and actually say, okay, now we are going to make the bomb, and we're going to take the 20%, they'll be able to do it very rapidly and in a facility that's very small.
David Albright, president of the Institute for Science and International Security, also former UN weapons inspector in Iran. Thank you very much for joining us.